Hi everyone, my name is Vess Rusev and this is episode number 17 of the East Auckland Properties Show. Today I am at the office of New Zealand's top firm, Duncan King Law, joined by the director of the firm, Kristine King. Hi Kristine.
Hi, thanks for having me today. So everybody, I'm Kristine King. I'm a director of this firm. We're a specialist property practice. So as you probably work out in Auckland, we do a lot of conveyancing transactions. In any one year, we're putting through thousands of transactions. Mm-hmm. And obviously on top of that, doing all the other work you'd expect from property lawyers. So subdivisions, refinances, title corrections, the whole thing. But obviously property is our passion and we love looking after people.
Okay, cool. So the idea of the next 5 or 10 episodes will be to try and help you avoiding all the common mistakes related to property transactions, doesn't matter selling or buying. So today we're going to cover the different title types that we have in New Zealand. So what are the most common title types we have in New Zealand?
Sure, that's a good question. I think the first thing, if I can sort of segue for a second, is the first thing you should really be asking, and you guys should be asking, is why do I care? What does it really matter what type of title you have? And I guess the thing is to maybe think about a car for a second. Would your wife be happy if you just bought a car because it's red? You know what I mean? We do laugh about it.
Probably
right?
she will be.
Yeah, but I guess the same thing applies with titles because, you know, you've got different types and they do different things. So you can't just buy a property because, you know, the house is white or it's got 3 bedrooms. We really need to work out what it is, therefore what it can do for you. Okay, so in terms of the title types in New Zealand, guys, I love a good story. I like to explain things in terms of things that we can all relate to. And I think the one thing we relate to is maybe when we were young and we used to share toys. Okay, so bear with me for a second. So if you imagine, we've got maybe the first title type. Okay, so that we call it a Feesimple title in my world. A lot of people though talk about it being freehold.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because to be honest, for lawyers, freehold actually means it's free of any mortgage. But hey, for you guys, just think about Feesimple being freehold. And in terms of our analogy of sharing toys, imagine it's a great toy that you have all to yourself. Okay, so you don't have to share with anyone because it is yours. Having said that though, there might be rules about how you use that toy, okay, and that may restrict or occasionally let someone else use your toy. I'm thinking maybe a right of way or something like that, but essentially keep in mind a toy all to yourself, fee, simple or freehold, okay? We start then kind of moving down the scale of titles, and if you imagine then we've got a cross lease, so there's a little bit more sharing going on. And cross lease is a kind of fun actually thinking about how we actually came to have them in New Zealand, because we're the only country, I don't know if you know.
Oh really?
Yeah, we're the only country in the world that have cross leases. And it all comes about because Kiwis love a bit of DIY. Not a joke, this is absolutely straight up. Someone cooked up this scheme where we didn't really want to go to council and say, hey, can I subdivide my section? Because council would say, hey, you need to pay some sort of contribution or... It
takes time.
It takes time, it takes money, but also they had rules about site coverage. So some really smart Kiwi with a bit of DIY went, oh, I'm going to pretend that I'm not subdividing for council purposes, but I actually am. So we've ended up with this arrangement where you actually share the land with your neighbour, but you've actually got a lease over your house that gives you the exclusive use of your house. So it means your neighbour can't come in and suddenly start using your kitchen because you've got that exclusive use. And then sometimes we might have a wider area, your garden, with also exclusive use rights. So again, your neighbour can't pop over and suddenly just barbecue on your deck. Okay, so that's a cross lease.
Is that the exclusive use?
In terms of that garden area?
Yes.
It should be. Okay. But again, your lawyer really needs to check because some leases are better than others. So it's actually making sure that it really is what you think it's going to be.
We're going to cover cross leases in our next video.
Yeah, fantastic. So moving down again this scale of sharing toys, we start to get into ideas with a lot more sharing. The next one would be a unit title. The best way to think of that is an apartment. Okay, so you own a defined space, a box, a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional space, but then you have shared use of common areas, so driveways, lobbies, stairwells, and things like that. So you really have quite a lot of sharing because you're wandering past everybody every day. You're in the hallway. So we had to have rules around that sharing. Okay, and that's where we get things like body corporates, that's a collection of the owners, and then body corporate rules, which are those rules of how do you use your defined space, but also how do you use, share, and manage and maintain those shared spaces. Okay. So again, we're getting into quite a few bit of sharing with toys. Okay. Now, really sadly, at the bottom of our sort of sharing list, we've got this concept of leasehold. Okay. Now,
can we just clarify something about unit title? What is a strata? What is a unit title? What are the differences?
The funny thing, they're exactly the same.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you so much for that question. Because
I'm trying to be a buyer or a seller.
I know, and the hard thing is that the concept of a stratum estate is quite a technical term for lawyers to describe how we've legally created the unit title concept. Okay, but if you see something like a stratum estate in freehold, the in freehold bit is recognising that the underlying land where your building sits on is a freehold or a fee simple section. Okay, but you can get some other kooky stuff like stratum estate and leasehold, right? So what you're actually doing, you've got an apartment, and being really simple about this, someone's built an apartment block on leasehold land. Okay, and so we're about to explain the leasehold, and so this is a great segue into that. Leasehold means someone else owns the land. Okay, you don't own it, okay? You have just got the right to use that land. Okay, so if you imagine a stratum estate and leasehold, you've got this amazing layering of things. So someone else, sadly guys, actually owns the underlying land. Then someone has actually developed it to build an apartment block. So you as owners have got your defined space, but at all times you will be paying some sort of ground rent to the absolute owner of that land. Okay. So talking then just very simply about leaseholds, it is exactly that, a really sad kind of, well, it's a super sad system where someone else owns the land, you're just allowed to use the house on top, but your ability to continue using the house on top is only linked to you continuing to pay an annual rent or a lease payment. And unfortunately in New Zealand, the one thing that's usually going up is the value of land. So the problem with leasehold estates is every year, or depending on how your lease is drafted, maybe every 7 years, they're going to recalculate your ground rent or your leasehold payment to match the new value of the land.
So how often usually you're going to have an update of the...
Well, it really comes down to what's in the lease. We used to have these amazing leases where the period for the rent review, we'd call it, was really long. And it might be there wasn't a rent review for 100 years or commonly 21 years. A lot of those leases though have been redrafted to allow more rent reviews to occur more regularly. Horrible for the owner of the leasehold because you're facing quite regular hikes. But another way to think about it is it stops that absolute shock where you haven't had a rent increase for 21 years and suddenly, and we have seen this in Auckland, rents had been going from a few thousand to 40, 50,000 per year, someone's income. So I think coming back to my explanation, my analogy on titles, always keep in mind that there is a scale of sharing, and every title though is different. So please guys, don't assume because you've seen one cross lease, you've seen them all. Your lawyer, and you should be reviewing all your documents because they've all been drafted differently, and it's really important that you, your lender, your insurer, all your professionals do actually understand what you're buying and are happy with it.
Awesome. So that was all for today. Next time we're gonna cover cross leases, and do you have anything else to add to the video?
Thanks. Just a quick thing, just guys, remember that all these videos are for general educational purposes, and you really need to talk to your own professionals and take professional advice in terms of any title or purchase.
Cool. Thanks for your time again, and see you next time. Thank you.